My name is Emily Thompson. I am 25 years old, and until last Thanksgiving, I thought I understood my place in our family. As a financial analyst, I pride myself on seeing patterns others miss, but I never saw this coming. When I overheard my father tell my sister, "Your sister doesn't deserve a dime, she's out," my entire world collapsed. Worse still, when I caught my mother's eye, she just smiled. Before I share what I did that night, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit subscribe if you've ever felt undervalued by the people who should love you most. Growing up in Boise, Idaho, my family appeared picture perfect from the outside. Our two-story colonial home in the North End neighborhood, with its manicured lawn and holiday decorations that neighbors admired, was the physical manifestation of what everyone believed about the Carter family. My father, William, built his construction company from scratch, expanding from residential renovations to commercial properties across the Mountain West. He often reminded us that hard work was the foundation of success, though I later realized his definition of hard work varied depending on which daughter he was addressing. My mother, Margaret, leveraged her former beauty queen status into becoming the quintessential society wife, organizing charity galas and maintaining social connections that benefited my father's business. Her carefully curated image extended to how she presented her daughters to the world. While she insisted appearances were secondary to character, her actions consistently proved otherwise. Then there was my sister, Olivia, 2 years younger than me, but somehow always the focal point of our family narrative. With her natural charisma and striking features that mirrored my mother's, Olivia effortlessly commanded attention in every room. From her dance recitals to school plays, our parents never missed a performance, rearranging business meetings and social engagements to ensure their presence. The contrast with my own achievements became apparent early. When I won the state math championship in 8th grade, my parents sent me with my math teacher because they had already committed to attending Olivia's regional choir competition, despite her being merely one voice among 60. "Your sister needs our support more," my mother explained. "You've always been so independent, Emily." That independence wasn't innate, but cultivated through necessity. By 16, I was working part-time at the local library, saving every dollar possible. My parents praised my work ethic while simultaneously paying for Olivia's weekend shopping trips and driving lessons. When I requested financial support for SAT prep courses, my father suggested I use my savings. "You need to learn the value of money," he said, not recognizing the painful irony of his words. While Olivia showed off her new designer backpack at dinner, my grandmother, Helen, was the one true ally in my family. During weekend visits to her small craftsman home across town, she would review my savings account statements with genuine interest. "Financial independence is freedom," she would tell me while teaching me about compound interest and investment strategies. When Olivia complained about these boring visits, she was allowed to stay home, missing the valuable lessons that would shape my future. When grandmother Helen passed away during my senior year of high school, she left me a modest inheritance of $15,000, specifically earmarked for my education. At the reading of the will, I noticed my parents exchange looks when this provision was revealed. "Your grandmother always favored you," my mother commented later, somehow making a loving gift feel like a divisive act. The inheritance became my ticket to attend a prestigious finance program at Boston University, though even this achievement was diminished at home. While I worked multiple campus jobs to supplement my scholarship and inheritance, Olivia chose to attend the Savannah College of Art and Design for fashion, with our parents covering her full tuition, apartment, and living expenses. "Your sister has such a creative spirit," my father would say. "She needs freedom to explore her talents without worrying about money." During holiday breaks, the disparity in our treatment became increasingly difficult to ignore. My mother would showcase Olivia's fashion sketches to visitors, while my Dean's List achievements went unmentioned. When relatives asked about my studies, my father would quickly redirect conversations. Emily is doing fine with her numbers, but wait until you see what Olivia designed this semester. By graduation, I had learned to expect this imbalance, to swallow the hurt when my parents arrived late to my commencement ceremony, because Olivia's end-of-year fashion show ran over schedule. I had learned to celebrate my own victories privately, finding validation in my accomplishments rather than seeking it from people who seemed incapable of providing it. What I hadn't yet learned, however, was that this pattern of favoritism wasn't just hurtful. It was setting the stage for a betrayal far more calculated than I could have imagined. The small slights and overlooked achievements were merely symptoms of a deeper problem, one that would eventually force me to redefine not just my relationship with my family, but my understanding of self-worth itself. After graduating summa cum laude, I accepted a position with a prestigious financial consulting firm in Denver. Putting nearly 1,000 miles between myself and the family dynamics that had shaped my formative years proved both a physical and emotional liberation. For the first time, my achievements were recognized on their own merits, without immediate comparison to Olivia or subtle dismissals from my parents. My tiny studio apartment in Capitol Hill became my sanctuary. Though barely 700 square feet, it was mine alone, paid for with my own salary. I furnished it piece by piece, each new addition representing another step toward building a life defined entirely by my own choices. The framed financial certification on my wall held more pride of place than any family photo, a fact I recognized as both triumph and tragedy. Following the financial wisdom my grandmother had instilled, I established a rigorous personal financial plan. By 23, I had a 6-month emergency fund, a diversified investment portfolio, and retirement contributions that my more senior colleagues admitted surpassed their own. While my friends splurged on Denver nightlife and luxury brands, I maintained a disciplined approach to spending, finding satisfaction in watching my net worth grow month after month. Despite the emotional distance I maintained, I continued fulfilling what I perceived as familial obligations. Each month, I transferred $500 to an account designated for family expenses, initially created to help with my father's business during a construction slowdown. Even when the economy recovered and his company flourished again, I maintained these contributions, viewing them as tangible proof of my commitment to family despite everything. My visits home became increasingly rare and abbreviated. Each Thanksgiving or Christmas spent in Boise left me emotionally drained as the patterns established in childhood persisted into adulthood. My career milestones were acknowledged with perfunctory congratulations before conversation quickly shifted to Olivia's latest fashion venture, regardless of its actual success. And success for Olivia proved elusive. Her post-graduation attempts to launch her own clothing line faltered repeatedly, each failure cushioned by parental financial intervention. When her first pop-up shop closed after 3 months, my parents provided capital for a second attempt. When wholesale orders fell through, they covered the production costs. While I built my financial foundation brick by careful brick, Olivia operated with the security of knowing any financial misstep would be corrected without consequence. "Your sister is an artist," my mother explained during one particularly tense holiday dinner after I questioned the wisdom of funding Olivia's third failed business attempt. "She needs freedom to pursue her vision without being constrained by practical concerns." The unspoken implication hung heavily in the air. I was practical, dependable Emily, blessed with financial acumen but lacking the spark that made Olivia special. My success was expected and therefore unremarkable. Her failure was merely part of a romantic artistic journey worthy of continued investment and admiration. The inequity of it all built a slow-burning resentment that I struggled to reconcile with my desire to maintain family connections. Each promotion I earned, each investment that paid off, carried a bittersweet quality. I was proving my worth in the most Tangible ways possible, yet never quite earning the recognition freely given to Olivia simply for existing. 3 years into my Denver life, I met Daniel, a structural engineer whose pragmatic approach to life mirrored my own. Having grown up in a large, boisterous Italian family where affection was expressed openly and achievement celebrated equally, he noticed the tension in my rare phone calls with my parents in ways I had long since normalized. "You shrink when you talk to them," he observed, after witnessing a conversation where my promotion to senior analyst was acknowledged with my mother's immediate pivot to Olivia's upcoming fashion show. "It's like watching someone fold themselves into a smaller and smaller space." His outside perspective illuminated patterns I had accepted as immutable facts of my family dynamic. Through his eyes, I began recognizing the subtle manipulation tactics my parents employed, the way they maintained control through financial and emotional means, the manner in which they positioned Olivia and me as competitors rather than allies. Daniel encouraged me to establish clearer boundaries, to demand the respect my accomplishments deserved. But years of conditioning made confrontation feel impossible. Instead, I retreated further, limiting communication to brief texts and obligatory holiday calls, still hoping that eventually my parents would recognize the imbalance without me having to articulate it directly. "They'll see your value someday," I told myself, adding another $1,000 to my monthly investments, building wealth they didn't know about, creating security they couldn't control. "Success is the best revenge," I whispered to my grandmother's photograph on my nightstand, not yet ready to acknowledge that the people who should value you most shouldn't need success as proof of your worth. After 2 years of declining holiday invitations, citing work commitments that were only partially fabricated, I finally agreed to return to Boise for Thanksgiving. Daniel had proposed the month before, and despite my reservations, I felt obligated to share this milestone with my family in person. Perhaps I reasoned this tangible evidence of my personal happiness would finally break through the patterns of the past. The Boise rain welcomed me home as a steady November drizzle that matched my apprehension as the taxi approached the familiar colonial facade. My mother greeted me at the door with air kisses that never quite reached my cheeks, her eyes immediately dropping to my engagement ring. "Very tasteful," she remarked, which from Margaret Carter constituted high praise. "Small, but that's fashionable now, isn't it? Minimalism." The diamond was actually exactly what I had wanted. A lab-created, ethical stone selected with my environmental values in mind, but I swallowed this explanation. Already, not 5 minutes into my visit, I was editing myself, a reflex as automatic as breathing. My father emerged from his study, giving me a brief hug that smelled of expensive cologne and the whiskey he favored in the evenings. "The prodigal daughter returns," he joked, using the same phrase he had employed since my college days, as though my pursuit of independence had been some form of rebellion rather than a necessary step toward adulthood. "William, don't start," my mother admonished lightly. "Emily has only just arrived." Then, without transition, "Olivia's new boyfriend is just wonderful. Ethan works in venture capital. They're running a bit late, but you'll meet him at dinner." The familiar redirection stung despite my preparation for it. My engagement, mentioned in passing, was immediately overshadowed by Olivia's latest relationship. Some patterns were too ingrained to break, even with years and distance between instances. As I settled into my old bedroom, now converted into a generic guest room with no trace of my adolescence remaining, I noticed Olivia's childhood awards and photographs still adorned the hallway. My academic trophies had apparently not warranted similar preservation. Swallowing this observation along with so many others over the years, I unpacked my carefully selected outfit for dinner and the small gifts I had brought, including financial planning books inscribed with personal messages. My father announced over pre-dinner drinks that he had scheduled a family meeting for Friday morning. Just some financial planning matters to discuss, he said casually, though his eyes didn't quite meet mine. Now that you are both established in your careers, it's time to talk about the future of the family legacy. My heart lifted slightly at this. Perhaps this visit would mark a turning point after all. My financial expertise would finally be valued, my career achievements recognized as contributing to this family legacy he mentioned. I sipped my wine with renewed optimism, allowing myself to imagine a rebalancing of our family dynamic. The house itself hadn't changed much in my absence. The formal living room still featured the uncomfortable Victorian furniture my mother had inherited from her family, more for display than actual use. The kitchen remained my father's domain, the one domestic space he claimed as his own, equipped with professional-grade appliances that he used for holiday meals, with the same precision he applied to business negotiations. My mother fluttered through final dinner preparations, occasionally delegating tasks to me with subtle critiques embedded in each request. "The napkins need to be folded properly, Emily. Remember how I showed you? Although, I suppose in Denver, you don't entertain formally much in your work environment." Each comment contained a tiny barb, assumptions about my life that went unchallenged because explaining the sophisticated client dinners I regularly organized or the social connections I had cultivated seemed like a defense I shouldn't need to mount. Instead, I folded linen napkins into perfect fans and bit my tongue. Olivia's arrival created the usual stir, her entrance timed for maximum impact after everyone else had gathered in the dining room. She swept in wearing one of her own designs, a dramatic black dress with architectural elements that showcased her creative talents. Behind her followed Ethan, tall and conventionally handsome in the way that seemed prerequisite for Olivia's boyfriends, his confidence evident in his easy smile and firm handshakes. "Everyone, this is Ethan Davis," Olivia announced unnecessarily, as though presenting a celebrity guest. "Ethan, my parents, William and Margaret, and my sister Emily. She works in finance too, actually." The two hung in the air, immediately positioning Ethan and me as professional equals, despite the significant differences in our careers. While I had built my reputation through analytical expertise and client service, venture capitalists like Ethan operated in a world of relationships and calculated risks with other people's money. The comparison was surface level at best, but my parents seized upon it immediately. "You two will have so much to talk about," my father declared, ushering Ethan to the seat beside him rather than next to Olivia. "Ethan, tell me about your current projects." Olivia mentioned something about tech startups. Throughout dinner, the conversation revolved around Ethan's work, my father peppering him with questions about investment strategies and market trends, topics he had never once discussed with me despite my professional expertise. My mother focused on extracting details about Ethan's family background, lighting up when he mentioned his parents' summer home in Cape Cod. When the topic briefly shifted to my engagement, Olivia quickly redirected attention by announcing she and Ethan were considering moving in together, a declaration that prompted my mother to immediately begin discussing potential neighborhoods and renovation possibilities. My own news apparently warranted no such planning assistance. Between the main course and dessert, I attempted to contribute meaningfully by mentioning my firm's work with family businesses on succession planning. "Actually, Dad, if you're thinking about long-term planning for your company, I'd be happy to look over your current structure. We've developed some tax-advantageous models that might benefit you." My father waved away the offer with his dessert fork. "No need, sweetheart. My business partners and I have excellent financial advisors, but thank you for the thought." The dismissal was polite, but firm. My professional capabilities, recognized and rewarded in Denver, held no currency in this house. I was still just William and Margaret's daughter, defined by my relation to them rather than my individual accomplishments. As coffee was served, The conversation shifted to holiday plans, with my mother orchestrating Christmas attendance as though conducting a symphony. When I mentioned potential work conflicts, she sighed dramatically. You always were difficult to pin down for family events, Emily. Some things never change. The familiar knot of frustration tightened in my chest. I excused myself to use the restroom, needing a moment away from the performance of family harmony that left me feeling increasingly like an understudy who had never learned the proper lines. As I passed my father's office on the way back, I noticed the door slightly ajar, voices carrying through the opening. Olivia's distinctive laugh, followed by my father's deeper tones, drew me closer. I hadn't intended to eavesdrop, had never been the type to seek information through subterfuge, but the mention of my name froze me in place, hands suspended in the air before knocking. We need to discuss the inheritance plan before the family meeting tomorrow. My father's voice carried clearly through the partially open door. I've made some adjustments to the initial draft. From my position in the hallway, I could see a slice of the room through the door crack, just enough to observe my father behind his mahogany desk, Olivia perched on the leather sofa opposite him. My mother stood by the window, her silhouette outlined against the rain-streaked glass. The business holdings and primary property investments will transfer directly to you, Olivia, my father continued, shuffling papers before him. We've established the trust structure to minimize tax implications, as Ethan suggested. A cold weight settled in my stomach. I had assumed the family meeting would include all of us in these discussions. Instead, it appeared decisions had already been made without my input or knowledge. What about Emily? Olivia asked, her voice carrying a hint of hesitation that surprised me. Shouldn't she be part of this conversation? My father's response struck like a physical blow. Your sister. She doesn't deserve a dime. She's out. The words hung in the air, simple and devastating in their finality, not a discussion point or a negotiation, but a conclusion already reached. William, my mother interjected, though her tone carried no real objection. Perhaps we should phrase that more delicately when we speak with her. My father laughed, a short, dismissive sound I had heard countless times when he encountered opinions that didn't align with his own. Why? Emily made her choices. She abandoned the family business potential to chase her corporate career in Denver. She visits twice in 3 years. She never calls unless it's a birthday or holiday. Why should she benefit from the legacy I've built? The room blurred before me as tears threatened, but I blinked them back fiercely, refusing to miss a word of this revelation. Besides, my mother added, her voice carrying that familiar note of reasoned judgment that had always made her criticism so difficult to contest. Emily has always been so independent, so insistent on making her own way. This is really giving her exactly what she's always wanted: financial autonomy. The twisted logic left me breathless. My independence, born from necessity when support wasn't offered, was now weaponized as justification for complete exclusion. She makes good money at that firm, my father continued. She doesn't need our help. You do, Olivia. Your creative ventures require capital that traditional banks don't understand. Your vision needs nurturing. My sister shifted uncomfortably, and for a brief moment I felt a surge of hope that she might defend me, might recognize the fundamental unfairness unfolding. I guess, she said slowly, but it seems wrong not to include her at all. Couldn't we allocate something, even symbolically? My mother moved from the window then, placing a hand on Olivia's shoulder. Darling, your generosity is admirable, but your father and I have discussed this extensively. Emily has chosen a path separate from this family. Her priorities lie elsewhere. She's built her own safety net, my father added firmly. You need ours. It's that simple. Silence followed, heavy with the weight of this betrayal. From my vantage point, I could see Olivia's shoulders slump slightly in acquiescence. Whatever token resistance she had offered dissolved under our parents' united front. Besides, my mother continued, her voice dropping to a more confidential tone, we need to be practical about the actual state of our finances. The business expansion hasn't performed as projected, and the North End development is still tied up in permitting issues. What remains needs to be carefully managed, not split between competing interests. This revelation added another layer of shock. My father's business, always presented as unqualifiedly successful, apparently faced challenges significant enough to impact inheritance planning. Yet another reality hidden behind the carefully maintained facade of Carter family prosperity. As this information crashed over me, I must have made some small sound because my mother's head turned toward the door. Our eyes met through the narrow opening, her expression shifting from surprise to something more calculated. Rather than embarrassment at being overheard or concern for my feelings, her lips curved into a small, knowing smile. That smile demolished any possibility that this had been a misunderstanding or a difficult decision reluctantly reached. She wasn't sorry I had overheard. She wasn't sorry about the decision itself. The smile conveyed everything they had discussed, disagreed upon it, and now I knew my place, outside their inner circle. I stepped back from the door, legs unsteady beneath me. 25 years of memories cascaded through my mind, reframing themselves in light of this new understanding. The missed academic ceremonies, the dismissed achievements, the financial support freely given to Olivia while I worked multiple jobs, the constant redirecting of attention. These weren't isolated incidents or unfortunate oversights. They were manifestations of a fundamental truth I had spent my entire life trying not to see. In my parents' eyes, I had always been expendable. Somehow, I made it back to my guest room without encountering anyone. I closed the door silently behind me and sank onto the edge of the bed, the generic floral comforter a further reminder that I had been systematically erased from this house, from this family's future. Years of subtle emotional neglect crystallized into this single, undeniable fact. They had written me out of the family story entirely, not just financially, but fundamentally. She's out. Not just from the inheritance, but from the inner circle of genuine family belonging. Sitting in that sterile guest room, surrounded by beige walls devoid of any trace of my existence, I felt a strange sense of clarity emerging through the pain. The approval I had sought my entire life, the recognition I had worked so hard to earn, had never been available to me. No achievement would have been sufficient, no effort adequate to secure the place freely given to Olivia by virtue of some intangible quality I apparently lacked. The hollowness in my chest gave way to something harder, more defined. If I had been declassified as family in their eyes, perhaps it was time I acknowledged that reality and acted accordingly. The financial analyst in me, trained to evaluate situations objectively and formulate strategic responses, began to assert itself through the emotional turmoil. I hadn't just overheard a conversation, I had received critical information that demanded action, and for the first time in my life, I knew exactly what that action needed to be. Sleep proved impossible as my mind raced through implications and possibilities, analyzing the situation as I would a complex financial scenario for a client. By 2 a.m, the house had fallen silent around me. My family members retreated to their rooms, unaware that their world was about to fundamentally change. My laptop glowed in the darkness as I methodically accessed every financial account connected to my family. As a financial analyst, I had always maintained meticulous records, including the history of every contribution I had made to family expenses over the years. The spreadsheet I compiled told a story very different from the one my parents had constructed. Since beginning my career, I had transferred over $40,000 to the family account, initially established when my father claimed a temporary cash flow problem in his business. Those transfers had continued monthly, even after I moved to Denver, a dutiful daughter supporting the family despite the emotional distance. Money that, according to their own private conversations, had been sustaining a business facing more significant challenges than I had been led to believe. Deeper investigation revealed something even more disturbing. The $15,000 inheritance from my grandmother, which should have been exclusively mine, had been partially borrowed by my parents 3 years ago. $8,000 had been transferred from that dedicated account to cover what appeared to be production costs for one of Olivia's failed fashion launches. No permission had been requested. No repayment had been made. My throat tightened with a fresh wave of betrayal. Even my grandmother's final gift to me had not been respected as mine alone. The money she had intended for my education and future had been redirected to sustain the pattern of favoritism that had defined our family dynamic. Most shocking of all was the discovery that my father had listed me as a personal guarantor on several business loans without my knowledge, using my strong credit history and financial stability as additional security for his increasingly risky ventures. My signature appeared on documents I had never seen, apparently signed during one of my rare visits home when I had authorized what I thought were routine family insurance updates. The magnitude of the deception staggered me. I wasn't just excluded from their future planning, I had been actively exploited while being systematically marginalized. My financial responsibility used to underwrite their preferential support of Olivia, while I received nothing but dismissal in return. With hands that had stopped shaking and now moved with deliberate precision, I began the process of complete financial separation. First, I transferred all remaining funds from joint or family-connected accounts into my private accounts in Denver. The movements would be flagged by morning, but by then, I would be gone. Next, I drafted formal letters revoking my status as guarantor on any outstanding loans, citing the fraudulent nature of my purported consent. I couldn't legally remove myself from existing agreements without lender approval, but I could document the circumstances and begin the process of extricating myself from future liability. I removed myself as the emergency payment contact on Olivia's apartment lease, a position I hadn't even realized I occupied until finding the documentation in my email archives. I canceled the automatic monthly transfers to the family expense account, scheduling a final message to notify my parents that these contributions would no longer continue. As the night deepened toward dawn, I moved beyond immediate financial concerns to longer-term protections. I contacted my firm's legal department via encrypted email, briefly outlining the situation and requesting an urgent consultation regarding potential identity fraud and financial misrepresentation. I changed passwords on every account, established new security questions unrelated to personal information my family might know, and placed freezes on my credit reports to prevent any new accounts being opened in my name. Each action built upon the last, creating distance and protection between myself and the people who had proven themselves unworthy of the trust I had placed in them. With each digital severing, I felt a curious mixture of grief and liberation. The family I had longed to truly belong to had never actually existed. The realization hurt, but acknowledging it created space for something new to emerge. At 4:30 in the morning, I drafted a final document, not for legal purposes, but for my own clarity. I detailed every instance of emotional manipulation I could recall, every financial exploitation I had discovered, every dismissal and redirection that had made me feel invisible in my own family narrative. The document ran to nearly 7 pages, a testament to patterns too consistent to be accidental, too pervasive to be misunderstandings. This wasn't a letter I intended to share, at least not immediately. It was evidence, both for myself in moments of wavering resolve, and potentially for others, should my parents attempt to rewrite history when they discovered what I had done. The truth, documented and undeniable, was my strongest protection against the gaslighting I anticipated would follow. As pre-dawn light began filtering through the guest room blinds, I packed my belongings methodically. The gifts I had brought remained wrapped on the dresser, the financial planning books I had inscribed with hopeful messages, now ironic reminders of my misplaced faith in family reconciliation. I left them where they were, silent witnesses to my departure. I moved through the silent house one last time, a ghost visiting scenes from a past that looked very different in the harsh light of new understanding. The formal living room, where achievements had been announced and celebrated, but never mine. The kitchen, where holiday meals had been prepared with my help, but never to my taste. The family photographs lining the staircase, chronicling Olivia's growth and accomplishments, while mine received only token representation. In my father's office, the door now firmly closed, lay the paperwork that had confirmed what I had always suspected, but never allowed myself to fully acknowledge. Beyond that door, plans had been made to build a future that excluded me entirely, a family legacy that would pass me by despite my contributions to maintaining it. My hand rested briefly on the smooth wood of the door, the physical barrier between me and the truth, serving as an apt metaphor for the emotional walls this family had maintained. I didn't need to open it again. I had seen enough, heard enough, to understand my place here with perfect clarity. As I placed my suitcase by the front door and prepared coffee in the kitchen, I felt strangely calm. The night had transformed my shock and pain into something more productive, a clear-eyed assessment of reality and a strategic response. To protect myself going forward. For perhaps the first time in my life, I was seeing my family without the distorting lens of hope and longing that had colored all previous interactions. When the coffee finished brewing, I poured 4 cups and arranged them at the dining room table. A silent invitation to the conversation that would serve as my final interaction with the Carter family. Then I sat in my usual place, the seat that had always positioned me slightly outside the inner circle, and waited for the household to awaken to a new reality. My father appeared first, drawn by the aroma of coffee and the uncharacteristic sight of someone else awake before him. He faltered briefly in the dining room doorway, clearly surprised to find me sitting calmly at the table, fully dressed at 6:30 in the morning, my suitcase visible in the foyer behind him. "You're up early," he observed, his tone carefully neutral as he assessed the situation. "Everything all right?" "Please sit down, Dad," I replied, gesturing to his usual place at the head of the table. "I've made coffee for everyone. There are some things we need to discuss before I leave." Something in my voice must have alerted him that this wasn't a routine conversation, because he complied without further comment, taking his seat and wrapping his hands around the coffee mug I had prepared. "Should we wait for your mother and sister?" he asked, eyes narrowing slightly as he studied my expression. "They should join us." "Yes," I agreed. "This concerns all of you." As if summoned by our conversation, my mother appeared in the doorway, already dressed for the day in one of her casual but expensive outfits, her surprise at finding us both at the table poorly concealed. "What's this? A pre-meeting?" she attempted to joke, though her eyes darted between my father and me, reading the tension. "Sit down, Margaret," my father directed, his businessman's instincts clearly sensing a negotiation about to unfold. "Emily has something to discuss with us." My mother took her place beside my father, across from my empty chair, her posture perfect as always, a social armor she never fully removed, even in her own home. "Should we wait for Olivia?" she asked, her fingers tapping lightly against her mug. "I'm here," my sister announced from the doorway, her hair tousled from sleep, confusion evident as she took in the unusual tableau of our family assembled so early. "What's going on?" "Please join us, Olivia," I said, maintaining the calm, professional tone I used in difficult client meetings. I was just about to explain. Once Olivia had settled into her seat, Completing our family circle for what I knew would be the final time, I reached into my laptop bag and withdrew 3 folders, each containing identical documents I had prepared during the night. Last evening, I overheard a conversation in Dad's office. I began, without preamble. A conversation about family inheritance plans that apparently don't include me. The reaction was immediate. My father's face hardened into the impassive mask he wore during tough negotiations. My mother's hand froze halfway to her coffee cup. Olivia's eyes widened, darting between our parents with newfound understanding of the tension permeating the room. That was a private discussion, my father stated, neither confirming nor denying the content. Yes, it was, I agreed. A private discussion about the family legacy that explicitly excluded me. Your exact words, if I recall correctly, were, "Your sister, she doesn't deserve a dime. She's out." My mother recovered first, her social training kicking in as she attempted to regain control of the narrative. "Emily, darling, you misunderstood. Financial planning is complex, and your father was simply exploring different scenarios." "Please don't lie to me, Mom," I interrupted, my voice steady despite the emotions threatening to break through. "Not anymore. I saw your face when you realized I was at the door. You weren't embarrassed or apologetic. You smiled." That simple observation silenced her more effectively than any accusation could have. The smile had been revealing precisely because it had been genuine, unguarded, before she could compose her features into the appropriate expression of maternal concern. "What's in the folders?" my father asked, businessman enough to recognize that emotion wouldn't serve him in this conversation. I slid one toward each of them. A complete accounting of my financial contributions to this family over the past 5 years. $47,832 in direct transfers to the family expense account, $8,000 borrowed from my grandmother's inheritance without my knowledge or consent, and documentation of loan guarantees established in my name that I never authorized. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the sound of my father reluctantly opening his folder and beginning to review the meticulously organized evidence before him. "I don't understand," Olivia said finally, her folder still closed before her. "Why would they need your money? Dad's business is successful." "Apparently not as successful as we've been led to believe," I replied, meeting my father's eyes as he looked up from the documents. "According to what I overheard, there are cash flow problems with the business expansion and issues with the North End development permits." My father's jaw tightened, confirmation enough that I had understood correctly. "Business has challenges, that's normal. Nothing for you girls to worry about." "It became something for me to worry about when you listed me as a guarantor on business loans without my consent," I countered, tapping the relevant page in the folder. "That's fraud, Dad." The accusation hung in the air between us, impossible to dismiss or reinterpret. My father had crossed a line beyond emotional manipulation into potentially criminal misrepresentation, and we all knew it. "Everything I've done has been for this family," he said finally, his voice lower, defensive. "To maintain our lifestyle, to provide opportunities for you girls." "For Olivia," I corrected quietly. "The opportunities were for Olivia. I've provided for myself since I was 16, working library jobs while you funded her shopping trips, paying my own way through college while you covered her tuition and apartment, building my career without connections or support while you bankrolled one failed fashion venture after another." Olivia flinched as though I had struck her. "That's not fair," she protested. "I didn't know about any of this." "Didn't you?" I asked, turning to face her directly. "You never questioned why I worked through high school while you didn't? Why I had student loans while you graduated debt-free? Why I lived in a studio apartment my first 3 years in Denver while you had a 2-bedroom in Savannah?" Her silence was answer enough. She had accepted the disparity as natural, the preferential treatment as her due. never questioning the source of the resources flowing her way or the conspicuous absence of similar support for me. I have transferred all my money out of any accounts connected to this family, I continued, returning my attention to my parents. I have initiated the process to remove myself as guarantor on the fraudulent loan documents. I have canceled all automatic transfers to family expenses, and I have consulted with legal counsel regarding the misappropriation of my inheritance funds. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her throat in a gesture too theatrical to be genuine. You would take legal action against your own family? After all we've done for you? The question was so divorced from reality that I almost laughed. What exactly have you done for me, Mom? Please enlighten me, because from where I'm sitting, you've taken my financial support while systematically excluding me from the family narrative. You've exploited my stability while dismissing my achievements. You've used me as a safety net for Olivia while treating me as an afterthought. My father, ever the pragmatist, recognized the precariousness of his position. What do you want, Emily? A revised inheritance plan? We can discuss alternatives. I don't want anything from you, I replied, surprised to discover the absolute truth in those words. I came to Thanksgiving dinner hoping for recognition, for some acknowledgement of my place in this family. What I received instead was confirmation that I have no place here and never did. So, I'm removing myself from the equation entirely. I stood then, gathering my laptop and purse, the physical act of preparing to leave lending finality to my words. You can't just walk away, my father said, an edge of panic finally breaking through his controlled exterior. The business loan guarantees, the family account, your monthly contributions, we've built our financial plans around these structures. The admission confirmed what I had suspected during my night of investigation. My financial stability had become a silent, unacknowledged pillar supporting their lifestyle and Olivia's creative pursuits. My exclusion from the inheritance plan didn't just reflect emotional preference. It revealed a calculated decision to extract maximum value from me while offering nothing in return. You should have considered that before deciding I didn't deserve a place in the family's future, I replied simply. Your financial planning is no longer my concern. My mother turned to Olivia, desperation evident as she sought an ally. Say something to your sister. Make her understand this is just a misunderstanding. Olivia looked between us, conflict evident in her expression. For the first time, perhaps, she was seeing the family dynamic from outside the protected position she had always occupied at its center. Is it true? She asked, finally addressing our parents directly. Are there problems with Dad's business? Have you been using Emily's money to support me while cutting her out of the inheritance? The direct questions, impossible to deflect or reframe, hung in the air between us. My parents exchanged glances, a silent communication I recognized from childhood, determining which version of reality to present. Before they could construct a suitable narrative, Olivia continued, surprising me with her insight. You've been playing us against each other our whole lives, haven't you? Making me the favorite so Emily would keep trying to earn your approval, using her sense of responsibility to financially support the family while convincing me I needed your backing to pursue my dreams. My father's face flushed with anger at having his tactics named so explicitly. That's ridiculous. We've supported both our daughters as appropriate to their needs and choices. No, Olivia said slowly, comprehension dawning in her expression. You've manipulated both of us, just in different ways. You made me dependent while making Emily feel inadequate, regardless of her success. This unexpected alliance shifted the power dynamic in the room. My parents, accustomed to maintaining control by keeping Olivia and me in separate emotional categories, suddenly faced united scrutiny. The business is in trouble, isn't it? Olivia pressed, opening her folder for the first time and scanning the financial records I had compiled. These contributions from Emily, they weren't just supplemental, they were keeping things afloat. My father's silence confirmed her suspicion more definitively than any denial could have. "How bad is it?" I asked, professional curiosity momentarily overriding my determination to disengage completely. After a long pause, my father seemed to deflate slightly, the carefully maintained facade of success cracking under the weight of accumulated deception. The North End development is 6 months behind schedule and significantly over budget. Environmental remediation costs were triple the initial estimates. The construction loans are underwater, and 3 investors have pulled out. The confession explained much about the inheritance planning I had overheard. There wasn't much left to distribute, and what remained had been allocated to Olivia, as the daughter they believed would continue to need support, while I was considered self-sufficient enough to be discarded. "Why didn't you just ask for my professional help?" I wondered aloud, the financial analyst in me automatically assessing potential solutions. I could have restructured the debt, approached new investors, developed a recovery strategy. "And admit failure?" my father retorted bitterly. "Acknowledge that my college dropout daughter with her fashion sketches received more financial backing than made business sense, while my financially successful daughter was right all along about conservative expansion planning?" The raw truth of his statement silenced us all. Pride and appearances had always mattered more than practical realities in the Carter household. Admitting financial mistakes would have meant conceding that the family narrative they had constructed was fundamentally flawed. "I'm leaving now," I said, finally retrieving my suitcase from the foyer. "I've booked a flight back to Denver. I suggest you consult with financial and legal advisors about your situation. I will not be providing further assistance." My mother made one last attempt at emotional manipulation, tears filling her eyes as she rose from her chair. "You would just abandon your family when we need you? What kind of daughter does that?" The question might have wounded me even hours earlier, triggering a lifetime of conditioning that had led me to seek their approval despite consistent evidence that it would never be genuinely offered. But the night's revelations had inoculated me against this particular toxin. "The kind of daughter you raised me to be," I answered simply. "Independent, self-sufficient, and practical about where to invest my resources. You taught me that lesson very effectively." I turned toward the door, then paused as Olivia rose from her seat. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't see it before. I just accepted what they gave me without questioning why you weren't receiving the same." The apology, however belated, offered a small measure of healing. "It wasn't your responsibility to see it," I told her. "We were both playing roles assigned to us long ago." As I opened the front door, stepping away from the house that had never truly been a home, my father called after me, his voice holding an unfamiliar note of desperation. "Emily, wait. We can renegotiate, we can make changes." I turned back one last time, taking in the tableau of my family, their carefully constructed world visibly crumbling around them. "No," I said with quiet finality. "We can't. You made your choice about my place in this family long ago. I'm finally making mine." The door closed behind me with a soft click, the sound of one chapter ending and another beginning. As I walked toward the waiting taxi, rain falling gently around me, I felt the weight of expectations and inadequacy lifting from my shoulders for the first time in 25 years. 6 months after that Thanksgiving morning, I stood at the window of my new apartment in Seattle, watching spring sunlight transform the Puget Sound into a ribbon of gold. The senior management position I had accepted with a prestigious investment firm had brought professional challenges and rewards beyond my expectations, but the personal transformation that accompanied my geographical relocation proved even more significant. The first weeks after leaving Boise had been difficult, filled with doubts and waves of grief for the family relationship I had finally acknowledged would never exist. There were moments when conditioning reasserted itself, When I reached for my phone to transfer money to the family account or found myself composing emails seeking parental approval, I now understood would never be genuinely offered. Daniel proved an unwavering support throughout this period, never saying, "I told you so," despite having identified the toxic family dynamic long before I could admit it to myself. His proposal had been reaffirmed once I returned to Denver, the engagement now representing not just our commitment to each other, but to building a future based on mutual respect and genuine recognition of each other's value. Families are what we make them, he reminded me during a particularly difficult evening when news of my father's business filing for bankruptcy protection had triggered complicated feelings of guilt and vindication. The people who see your worth and choose to celebrate it rather than exploit it, those are your real family. Those words became my touchstone as I built connections in Seattle, cultivating friendships with colleagues who appreciated my professional expertise and neighbors who shared common interests. For the first time, I approached relationships without the underlying fear of inadequacy that had colored my interactions throughout my life, the constant need to prove my worth through achievement or contribution. My contact with my birth family remained minimal and strictly on my terms. My father's attempts to reach me through business channels, ostensibly seeking professional advice but transparently hoping to reestablish financial support, were met with formal referrals to other consultants at my firm. My mother's emotional emails and voicemails, alternating between guilt-inducing reminiscences of family history and veiled criticisms of my abandonment, received brief, factual responses devoid of the emotional engagement she sought to provoke. Olivia, somewhat to my surprise, initiated contact independently 3 months after my departure. Her message acknowledged her complicity in the family dynamic, however unwitting, and expressed a desire to establish a relationship separate from our parents' influence. "I'm trying to understand who I am without their financial support and constant direction," she wrote. "It's harder than I expected, but also more liberating than I could have imagined. I think maybe you figured this out years ago, and I'm just catching up." Our communication began cautiously, years of positioned competition giving way slowly to a tentative alliance. When she secured her first design position with a sustainable fashion label, earning her place through talent rather than parental connections, I sent flowers and genuine congratulations, perhaps the first unambiguous celebration either of us had experienced from family. When she mentioned struggling to manage her finances now that parental subsidies had ended, I didn't offer money, recognizing that would simply transfer the dependency that had limited her growth. Instead, I shared the financial literacy fundamentals my grandmother had taught me, helping her develop a realistic budget and savings plan calibrated to her actual income rather than the inflated lifestyle our parents had maintained. "I never realized how much their financial support was actually control," she admitted during one of our monthly video calls. "Every dollar came with expectations about my choices, my appearance, my friends. The less I take from them, the more clearly I can hear my own voice." That growing clarity led Olivia to discoveries that paralleled my own journey toward independence. She moved to a smaller apartment she could afford independently, scaled back her design ambitions to match realistic market opportunities, and began therapy to address the patterns established in our dysfunctional family system. "I always thought I was the lucky one," she confessed, "their favorite, their focus. But that attention came with invisible strings that limited who I could become. Your independence wasn't just financial, it was fundamental. You built yourself while I was being constructed according to their specifications." The insight demonstrated a self-awareness I hadn't previously associated with my sister, suggesting that perhaps she, too, had been limited by the narrow role assigned to her in our family narrative, her apparent privilege carrying its own form of constraint. As my personal life stabilized into new patterns of genuine connection and professional success continued to validate my capabilities, I found myself thinking of my grandmother, Helen, with increasing frequency. Her legacy extended far beyond the modest financial inheritance my parents had partially misappropriated. The true gift she had given me was the foundation of financial literacy and independence that had ultimately provided my escape route from toxic family dynamics. In her honor, I established a financial literacy program targeted at young women from families with limited resources, providing both practical education and mentorship opportunities. The Helen Carter Foundation offered scholarships and internships, creating pathways to financial independence for young women who might otherwise remain trapped in cycles of dependency or exploitation. "Your worth isn't determined by others' ability to recognize it," became the Foundation's unofficial motto. Words I wished someone had spoken directly to my younger self during those years of seeking validation that was strategically withheld. When Daniel and I married in a small ceremony overlooking Puget Sound, surrounded by friends who had become chosen family, Olivia attended alone, having declined our parents' assumption that they would accompany her. The boundaries she was establishing, however tentatively, represented her own journey toward authentic identity, separate from the roles we had both been assigned. "They ask about you," she mentioned carefully during the reception. "They talk about reconciliation, about misunderstandings cleared up." "Have they acknowledged what they did?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "The financial exploitation, the emotional manipulation, the deliberate division they created between us?" Her silence was confirmation enough. Our parents remained committed to their version of reality, one in which their actions had been justified by good intentions, any harm merely incidental misunderstanding rather than a systematic pattern. "Then there's nothing to reconcile," I said gently. "I'm not angry anymore, Olivia. I've just accepted that the parents we needed weren't the parents we had. The relationship I wanted wasn't available, no matter how perfectly I performed or how much I contributed." My sister nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her expression. "I used to think you were the unlucky one," she admitted. "Not being the favorite, always working so hard for attention that came naturally to me. But you developed strength I'm only beginning to discover. Maybe being overlooked was actually your freedom." The observation held profound truth. The very dynamics intended to keep me striving for approval had ultimately equipped me with the independence to walk away when that approval proved to be a mirage, perpetually moved beyond reach. 6 more months passed, bringing me to the 1-year anniversary of my departure from Boise and the family system that had shaped but no longer defined me. The journey from that rain-soaked Thanksgiving to my current reality had not been linear. Progress measured not in continuous, forward movement but in the decreasing frequency of backward glances. There were still moments when conditioned responses surfaced, when a professional triumph triggered the automatic impulse to seek parental acknowledgement, or a financial decision activated the caretaking role I had occupied for so long. But those moments grew less frequent and less powerful, artifacts of old patterns rather than governing principles. What I learned was that my worth isn't measured by what others think I deserve, but by what I know I've earned. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you deserve, and there's nothing wrong with creating boundaries that protect your heart and your future. The greatest gift I gave myself wasn't the money I saved. It was the realization that I deserved respect and the courage to walk away when I didn't receive it. If you've ever felt undervalued by the people who should love you most, remember that your worth isn't diminished by their failure to recognize it. Have you experienced similar family dynamics? Share your story in the comments below, and if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more authentic conversations about family relationships and personal growth. Remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who don't see your value, even when those people are family. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to honor your own worth, whatever that journey might require.